In our search for imagining new forms of urban practice as a resistance to the neoliberal growing model of the city of Quito, we will point our focus toward the peripheries and margins of the city, which have been directly suffering this aggressive model of urban expansion, and that for decades, and through a repertoire of strategies, have been resisting to be absorbed by it, producing new forms of understanding and inhabiting the territory. Each and every form of life they deploy within their territories is a firm and blunt political stance against the neoliberal project enclosing them. We consider, as Raúl Tibeci points out, that it is especially from these invisible and marginalized spaces that urban space can be re-territorialized and reclaimed in an autonomous and emancipatory way. So our project is precisely helping to design the necessary tools to foster that resistance and put new strategies in action in the following years, as we will see later. As we'll explain in detail in what follows, for centuries and until today, two different social groups have been settling in the surroundings of the city. In Latin American geographical studies, they have been aggregated under the definition of urban indigenous. This term, it's worth saying, has allowed researchers to address in a different manner the historical association of the indigenous with the notion of rural, traditional, primitive, ancestral, or underdeveloped. Historians, again like Raúl Tibeci, for instance, have showed that forces operating in Andean countries, as Bolivia or Ecuador, towards the transformation of political regimes have always come from indigenous movements, constituted all along the 80s as a relevant political actor. So on one hand, we find those indigenous populations that have arrived to the city due to internal migration, and after gathering and associating themselves with members of their same rural community of origin, have led to the creation of neighborhoods where they can maintain their cultural practices and rebuild their identities according to that new territory. They are usually referred as migrant urban indigenous. On the other hand, conversely, we find those indigenous communities that throughout the centuries and before and during Spanish colonization have been occupying territories around the city, either as free indigenous or as working force in the haciendas. They are known as native urban indigenous, and availing themselves of the legal form of the commune since 1937, they have developed different strategies to strengthen and maintain their communal organization with the aim of avoiding their disappearance. Today, we believe they have the potential to constitute a renovated form of resistance against the forces of state and the capital. So neither clearly urban nor exclusively rural, indigenous communities therefore play a central role in outlining and defining the city of Quito and its urban-rural relations. Metropolitan District of Quito, however, is persistently being defined and organized by urbanistic perspectives of territorial planning that often, if not systematically, conceal the relevant impact that these populations, particularly the communes, have on the city, therefore ignoring them and aggressively appropriating communal territories for its expansion forecasts. Let's take a closer look at the communes. Regulated as legal entities under the 1937 Communes Law, yet always in a decreasing number, today there officially exist 49 communes in the Metropolitan District of Quito. Our research, based both on field trips and recent academic literature, focused first, legal framework, second, territorial definition, third, land property regimes, and last but not least, internal organization, either sustaining or threatening their existence. So first of all, these politically autonomous bodies with indigenous roots have been granted with territorial authority in the last Constitution of Ecuador, approved in 2008. At a discursive and theoretical level, these, together with the addition of Ecuador to the 169th Agreement of the International Labour Organization, provides them of collective self-determination rights, founded on the collective ownership of their territories, their own forms of internal direct democracy, and the communal character of their social relationships. However, at a more material level, and due to a various number of incongruences, legal voids, and contradictions between the different regulations protecting them, especially between the 2010 COTAD, which is the Organic Code for Autonomy and Decentralization, and both the 1937 Communes Law on the one side and the 2008 Constitution on the other, they have been rendered almost invisible to the eyes of institutional powers. Either municipal or state regulations and interventions over the territory are being exerted without any consultation. Territorial ordinances, highway constructions, sudden changes in land use, state infrastructure implementation, expropriation of human settlements with potential public utility purposes, all of the above are liquidating the collective rights granted to the communes by the current constitution. This invisibility has been enhanced by the fact that communal territories have never counted on legally defined footprints capable of proving to the state and the municipality their actual extension, rendering even more complex, if possible, any conflict with these institutions. Officially appearing as one-dimensional dots in the map, they end up being weak fragmented entities devoid from any legal power and any actual capacity to exert their collective rights as political subjects. This territorial vagueness worsens communes' vulnerability to capital pressures and accelerated urban expansion processes, since it allows not only for unconsulted urban interventions but also for expropriation processes to go on and on indiscriminately in their communal territories, disobeying both the COTAD and the 1937 law. These laws, indeed, recognize the imprescriptible, inalienable, unseizable, and undivisible character of communal property. They guarantee not only the collective use and exploitation of land use, but also the collective management of its natural resources. As such, most of the communes, rather than having titles for individual property, have developed the internal notion of usufruct as something that can be transmitted by inheritance within the same family. Nevertheless, increasing fragmentation and small-holding practices over communal lands have been a constant, particularly from the mercantilist agrarian reform in 1994, which favored both real estate sector and the stimulating role of the state regarding the disarticulation of the communes. Pressure exerted by this market logic is forcing many comuneros to legalize their properties in order to obtain individual titles, without which they would not be able to make use of the land in a productive or lucrative manner. That is why today there are only 24 communes within the DMQ that still maintain some form of communal property. Understanding communal land property as a determinant factor for self-identifying as commune does not seem to represent the reality, and as such it needs to be demystified. On the contrary, while communal productive assets are being dismantled, collective practices for political and social organization are consolidating, transcending the merely legal notion of commune and detaching themselves from the very tempting capitalist approach mentioned before. Strategies of direct democracy such as open assemblies and collaborative practices such as mingas are sustaining communal identity and allowing a great number of comuneros and comuneros to still define themselves as such, propelling the continuity and enhancement of different kinship ties with family, friends, and neighbors. Consequently, it becomes extremely important to understand the communes not only as rest and reminders of ancestral communal land, but rather as socio-organizational forms that have managed to survive in opposition to an expansive city, by means of reproducing daily innovative strategies to face the future within a society where market logic prevails. Continuous violations of the communal rights, as we've seen, have finally triggered both the restructuration of a strong indigenous ethnogenetic process carried out by Pueblo Kitu Kara and the arising of a political movement for the creation of the Confederation of Communes of the Metropolitan District of Quito. Both aim to provide the communes with political power and territorial presence, so that what formerly appeared as a one-dimensional point to the eyes of the dominant powers, a commune has now the potential to turn into an aleph for its inhabitants, acquiring a living thickness along a certain dimension that traditional systems of representation are unable to recognize. So passive limitlessness or boundlessness can become proactive infiniteness. Our ongoing project works in direct collaboration with Pueblo Kitu Kara towards the creation of the Confederation of Communes, helping them to envision those forms of political construction capable of activating and fostering the above-mentioned territorial shift. If anything, this exploration has made us acknowledge the necessary change in the role of the architect and urban thinker, and consequently the territory where our research is conducted. From there, it derives a reconsideration of the nature itself of urban practice. Now let's go and take a closer look at the online platform that we are developing currently with Pueblo Kitu Kara and other researchers from Flaxo and Instituto de Estudios Ecuatorianos. As a researcher, Catherine Hope-Gardner, involved in these processes from 2010, explains, communes' most recent efforts, combined or isolated, might be structured under two main lines of work that are intimately connected. On one hand, communes are willing to recover every kind of ancestral and communal practice as a way of life. On the other, they are looking forward to foster intra- and intercommunal economic and infrastructural development. We envision this platform as a living framework for the development of those strategies. Maria and I are not proposing an alternative planning, but communes are. It is called Plan de Vida del Buen Vivir Comunitario, Life Plan of the Communal Good Living, and it constitutes an alternative proposal to state planning that they have been developing in the last few years from their own convictions, cosmovisions, requirements, and demands. We are just offering a framework for them to develop such plan. To put it shortly, Planes de Vida are a vision for development from a perspective of territoriality in its broadest historical, cultural, and political meaning. Our platform, Herramientas para la autogestión y la producción urbana en comuna, which means tools for the self-management and the urban production in commune, is right now offering three main tools. They differ in territorial scale and range. The first one is still work in progress. We are directly collaborating with Marco León from Comuna de Tola-Chica and Pueblo Kitu Kara, who is helping in the development of their own communal census that aims to go beyond and counteract the official from the state and the municipality, helping the communes to self-regulate their territories and to show their own formality. It will be comprised of two surveys. The first one will be land-based and will comprise a register of land uses, property regimes, and territorial resources. All the data will be accessible in the mapping tool that I'll show soon. And the second survey instead will address the individual or the household unit. And besides typical demographic data, it will take the form of a participatory diagnosis that will allow to show the loss of communal forms of life on one hand and the continuity of ancestral knowledges in the territories on the other. The second instrument, as I mentioned, is a mapping tool that will start compiling all the information gathered. So as a starting point, we created a whole database compiling official geographic information and relating it to each and every cadastral lot registered in the municipality. We even gave them a made-up identification code to facilitate its access. The communal limits we considered are those created in a participatory workshop organized by researchers in the Institute of Ecuadorian Studies, with whom we are collaborating. In those workshops, 18 out of 49 communes were mapped by its inhabitants. So given the unofficial and vague condition of such limits, other footprints defined in different researches are included in the map. So the contradictions between them and the relations to land property regime can be consulted here as well. Or maybe here in this Google Earth visualization that will show the strong link existing between the limits of the communes and the topography and will help participatory mapping workshops in the future. So based on all of this information and of course with the help of on-site visits, the last of the tools provided will help each comunero and comunera to draw on her own terms the limits of his or her commune. These tools will contribute not only in the georeference and ulterior official recognition of communal boundaries, but also in the recovery of the practices and memories that produce them. So we aim ultimately to activate a deep debate around the notion of limits and its relation with the different dynamics of inhabiting the territory. A notion of limit that, while challenging classical forms of representation, has a real capacity to interfere and negotiate with state property regimes, defined precisely through the latter. Beyond a quantitative biophysical and socio-economic study of their communal territories, we aim to generate those qualitative self-governance tools needed to translate a lifeless system of Cartesian representation into one that, rather than categorizing and locking into shape, is capable of harboring and fostering the repertoire of the multiple ancestral and contemporary forms of life and practices being deployed in the communes. Above all, we need to understand such platform as an ongoing open source and always evolving counter-planning strategy with the final goal to fully re-inhabit the territory. If you want to take a closer look to the platform we are developing, please go to www.bitworks.com.mx/comunas and you will be able to navigate into the platform that we are creating together with Pueblo Kitu Kara. Actually, we have short-term next steps already planned, such as further developing the census, organizing together with Kitu Kara people a series of workshops, perhaps in Habitat 3 Forum next October, to explain the functioning of this platform and get the right feedback. Actually, to finalize, we would like to close with a final thought by saying that the struggle in the communes or within indigenous communities in Ecuador is far from being a local reality. As the Invisible Committee would say, it concerns the whole world, but not because it is defending the common good in general, but because a certain idea of what is good is commonly thought in this struggle.